3 weeks. That's how long it took me to notice something was wrong with my grandson. 3 weeks of weekend visits, of sitting across from a 7-year-old boy who used to climb the oak tree in my backyard, who used to beg me to take him fishing before the sun came up, and watching him just sit there, still, quiet in a way that didn't belong to him. I'm 63 years old. I've been a grandfather for 7 years now, and I know what tired looks like on a child. I know what bored looks like. I know what sad looks like. What I was seeing on my grandson's face those last few Saturdays was none of those things. It was something else, something I didn't have a word for yet. This is what I know now that I didn't know then. Sometimes the most dangerous things in a child's life don't announce themselves. They don't show up with bruises or broken bones. They come in quietly. They look like tiredness. They look like a phase. They look like nothing at all until you finally see them. My grandson's name is Marcus. He's 7. He has his father's jaw and his late grandmother's eyes. And up until about 4 months ago, that boy could not sit still for longer than 90 seconds. He was noise and motion and questions, the kind of kid who needed to know how everything worked and wasn't satisfied until you showed him twice. I used to drive home from his visits with my ears ringing and a smile I couldn't shake for 3 days. The first Saturday I noticed the change, I told myself he was coming down with something. He sat on my couch and watched cartoons without moving for 2 hours. I brought him a glass of juice, and he took it without looking up. I asked him if he wanted to go check on the tomato plants in the garden, usually his favorite thing, and he just shook his head slowly, like even the thought of standing up was too much effort. I touched his forehead. No fever. I asked him if anything hurt. He said no. I asked him if he slept okay. He thought about it for a second, just a beat too long, and then said yeah. I drove him home that afternoon with a quiet unease sitting in my chest that I couldn't explain. His mother, Diane, met us at the door. She looked fine, normal. She smiled and thanked me and took Marcus by the hand and led him inside. And I stood on the front porch for a moment after the door closed, staring at the wood grain, trying to figure out what I was feeling. I told myself it was nothing. That's what we do, isn't it? We tell ourselves it's nothing because the alternative is too heavy to pick up. The second Saturday was worse. Marcus fell asleep in the car on the way to my house. A 7-minute drive. He slept with his head against the window and his mouth slightly open, and I glanced at him in the rearview mirror at every red light. When I carried him inside, because he didn't fully wake up, even when I parked, he felt heavier than I remembered, not in pounds. In some other way, like something was pressing down on him from the inside. He slept on my couch for almost 3 hours. When he finally woke up, he was groggy and slow. He ate half a sandwich and then just sat there blinking. He asked me once if I had chocolate milk, and when I said I'd have to go to the store, he said, "Never mind," and lay back down. That was not Marcus. That was not my grandson. I called my son that night. His name is Thomas, and he works long hours, commercial construction, project management, on the road to job sites 3 or 4 days a week. I told him Marcus seemed tired lately, seemed different. Thomas said Diane had mentioned Marcus was going through a phase, that he'd been sleeping a lot at home too, that she thought maybe he was having a growth spurt. Growth spurt. Okay. I let it go. Another week. The third Saturday, I picked Marcus up at 9 in the morning. He was already dressed and waiting at the door, which was unusual. Diane usually had to hunt him down from wherever he was playing. He walked to my truck slowly, climbed in carefully, buckled his seatbelt. No questions. No, Grandpa, can we stop for donuts? No, negotiating for extra screen time. Just quiet. We were about halfway to my house when he leaned his head against the window and closed his eyes. "You tired, bud?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, without opening his eyes, he said something that I have turned over in my mind every single day since. "Grandpa," he said, "I don't want to drink my morning juice anymore." I kept my eyes on the road, kept my voice level. "Yeah? How come?" He was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, "It makes me feel like my head is full of cotton." I pulled into a gas station parking lot and put the truck in park. I turned and looked at my grandson. He was looking back at me now, his eyes half open, with an expression on his face that no 7-year-old should have, a kind of exhausted resignation. like a person who has been trying to explain something for a long time and keeps being told they're imagining it. Marcus, I said slowly, what juice are you drinking in the morning? The orange one, he said. Mom makes it before school, but it doesn't taste right. It tastes like. He frowned, searching for the word. Like medicine. I asked him if it tasted like that every day. He nodded. I asked him how long. He thought about it. Since after Christmas, he said. Since after Christmas. I did the math in the parking lot of a BP station on Route 9 with my hands still on the steering wheel. It was mid-March. That was nearly 3 months. I did not go home. I drove to the urgent care clinic on Millbrook Road instead. I told the front desk that my grandson had been experiencing unusual fatigue for several weeks and that he'd reported an odd taste in his daily orange juice. I used those exact words. The intake nurse looked at me for a moment, then looked at Marcus, then wrote something on her clipboard and called us back immediately. The physician on duty was a woman named Dr. Patricia Chen. She was calm and unhurried, the kind of doctor who makes you feel like you have all the time in the world even when you don't. She asked Marcus questions, in that easy way good doctors have with kids, not talking down, not rushing, and Marcus answered her, in his slow, cottony way. She checked his vitals. She looked in his eyes. She pressed gently on his abdomen. She asked him to follow her finger with his gaze, and he did, but slowly. Then she stepped out into the hall, and I followed her. I want to run a tox panel, she said, just like that. Quiet, direct, no build-up. I felt the floor shift under my feet, just slightly. What are you thinking? I asked. She looked at me steadily. His presentation, the prolonged sedation, the cognitive slowing, the reports of altered taste in a daily beverage. I don't want to speculate until I have results, but I want the panel. She had a nurse take the blood draw. Marcus didn't even flinch. He just watched the needle go in with those half-open eyes, like he'd gone somewhere else inside himself. We waited 45 minutes. I sat in that little room with my grandson, and I looked at the cartoon animals on the wall, and I breathed slowly, and I did not let myself think about what I was already thinking about. Marcus lay back on the exam table and drifted in and out of a light sleep. I held his hand. I counted the tiles on the floor. I thought about the fishing trips we used to take, how he'd wake me up at 5:15 a.m. by standing next to my bed, saying, "Grandpa, the fish don't wait," in a whisper he thought was quiet. Dr. Chen came back in. She sat on the rolling stool, which told me this wasn't going to be a standing conversation. She was quiet for 2 seconds, 2 full seconds before she spoke. The panel shows a significant concentration of diphenhydramine, she said. I didn't say anything. It's the active ingredient in Benadryl and a number of over-the-counter sleep aids, she continued. In an adult, the amount we're seeing would cause moderate sedation. In a child Marcus's size, she paused. This wasn't accidental exposure. This is a consistent, repeated dose. The room was very small suddenly. I was aware of Marcus's hand in mine, and of my own heartbeat, and of absolutely nothing else. How long? I said. Based on the metabolite levels, I'd estimate regular ingestion for at minimum 8 to 10 weeks, possibly longer. And 8 to 10 weeks, possibly longer. I looked at Marcus. He was asleep. I looked back at Dr. Chen. I'm required to contact Child Protective Services, she said. I'm doing that today. But I need to ask you who has primary care of this child on a daily basis. His mother, I said. My daughter-in-law. She prepares his morning juice before school. Dr. Chen wrote something down. She looked at me with an expression that was professional and measured, but not without feeling. Is there somewhere safe Marcus can stay tonight that is not his mother's home? Yes, I said immediately. He stays with me. I want to tell you right now what I did next, because some of you may wonder the same thing I've heard from others since. I did not call Thomas immediately. I know that sounds wrong. It sounds like a man making decisions he shouldn't be making alone. But I need you to understand something about my son. Thomas loves Diane completely. Not blindly, but completely. He is a man who believes in the people he loves, who extends trust the way some men extend credit generously and without a ceiling. If I had called him from that parking lot with half the picture and 3 times the emotion, I'm not sure what he would have done. I needed more than a blood test. I needed a case, so I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a man named Ray Kowalski. Ray had done investigative work for an insurance company I'd dealt with years back when I ran my own small contracting business. I still had his number. I called him and told him I needed to meet in the morning and that it was about a child and that I would explain everything in person. The second call I made was to my neighbor, Carol, a retired schoolteacher who had known Marcus since he was an infant, and who immediately said yes when I asked if she could sit with him for an hour in the morning while I ran an errand. I did not leave my grandson alone. I want that on the record. I drove him to my house, I made him scrambled eggs and toast, I sat with him while he ate, and I tucked him in on the pull-out bed in my study with the little lamp on and Carol 3 feet away in the hallway armchair with a book. Marcus was asleep before I finished smoothing the blanket. Ray met me at the Dunkin' on Clearwater Avenue at 8:45 the next morning. I brought the ER paperwork. I brought the pharmacy name and the approximate dosage window Dr. Chen had given me. I brought everything I had. Ray listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You want to know if she's been buying it," he said. "I want to know everything she's been buying, how often, and from where." He told me he'd have something in 72 hours. He had it in 48. Diane had been purchasing store-brand diphenhydramine sleep tablets, the 25 milligrams tablets, adult strength from 3 different pharmacies in our county, rotating between them in a pattern that was clearly intentional. Walgreens on Elm Street, CVS on the Route 17 bypass, a grocery store pharmacy in the next town over. The purchases went back not 8 weeks, not 10. They went back 5 months. The first purchase was dated the week after Thanksgiving. Ray laid the receipts out on my kitchen table, and I sat there and looked at them for a long time. I want to tell you what 5 months means. 5 months is 150 mornings. It's 150 glasses of orange juice prepared in a kitchen by a woman who kissed that boy on the head before he walked out to the school bus. It's 150 school days of a 7-year-old boy trying to learn to read and do math and sit still in class with a head full of cotton. His teacher had sent home a note in January asking if everything was okay at home because Marcus had been falling asleep during morning reading time. Diane had written back saying he'd had a string of late nights and that they were working on his bedtime routine. 5 months. I called Thomas that night. He was in the field in Clarksburg, 3 hours away. He'd been away all week on a job. I told him I needed him home in the morning. I told him it was about Marcus. I told him it was serious and that I didn't want to say more on the phone and that I needed him to trust me the same way he'd trusted me his entire life. He was in my driveway by 7:30 the next morning. I'm not going to describe in detail the way my son's face changed as I showed him what I had. I'm not going to put that on display because it belongs to him. What I will tell you is that Thomas is not a man who cries easily, and that morning I watched my son become, in the space of about 12 minutes, a version of himself I had never seen before. Not rage, not denial, something quieter and more terrible than either the specific grief of a man realizing that the life he believed he was living was a different life entirely. He looked at the pharmacy receipts for a long time. He looked at the ER report. He looked at me. "She asked me to stop working out of town so much," he said quietly. 4 months ago. I thought she wanted more time together. I put my hand on his shoulder. I didn't say anything. Thomas straightened up. He wiped his face once. He took a breath. Then he said, "Tell me what to do. That's my son. That is the man I raised." I am still proud of him for those 4 words. We did not go to the house together immediately. Thomas called his attorney first, a family lawyer named Greg Halstead, who I'd never met but who, as it turned out, had handled exactly this kind of situation before. Greg told us to sit tight, to keep Marcus where he was, to not confront Diane yet, and to bring every piece of documentation we had to his office that afternoon. Thomas and Diane had a custody arrangement that wasn't formally documented. They were still married. Diane had always been the primary caretaker by default of Thomas's work schedule, and there was nothing legally in place to prevent Marcus from being returned to her. That was the immediate problem. Until we moved, she had every right to demand her son back. Greg filed for an emergency temporary custody order that afternoon, citing the ER documentation and the pharmacy records. He attached Dr. Chen's written statement she had prepared one that morning without me asking, which told me she'd been in rooms like this before and knew what the next steps looked like. The hearing was the following morning. I sat in the back of that courtroom with Marcus's hand in mine because Thomas had brought him, because Greg said the judge should see the child in person, and I watched my son stand up and place 5 months of pharmacy receipts and a child's blood toxicology report in front of a family court judge. The judge reviewed the documents for 4 minutes. 4 minutes of silence in that room that felt like 40. Then she granted the temporary order. Diane was notified by Thomas's attorney. She called Thomas 17 times in the 2 hours after that. He let it go to voicemail. He showed me one of the messages later. I won't repeat what she said, but it was the message of a woman who had not expected to be caught and was not handling it gracefully. CPS opened a formal investigation the same day. Dr. Chen's report had already been in the system for 2 days by then. She had filed as required, and a caseworker had already made initial contact with the school to pull Marcus's attendance and behavioral records. What they found there supported everything. A pattern of sudden behavioral change beginning in late November, multiple incidents of the child sleeping in class, a physical exam flag from the school nurse in February that had been attributed to seasonal allergies. Seasonal allergies. There are moments in this kind of situation where you understand, with terrible clarity, how many chances there were for someone to see it. How many people looked at a drowsy, slow, cloudy-eyed little boy and saw a phase, a growth spurt, allergies. And I understand that. I have no anger for those people. They were doing what people do, finding the most ordinary explanation for an ordinary-seeming thing. That's not failure. That's human. But I will tell you this, and I want every grandparent, every aunt, every uncle, every coach and neighbor and family friend who might be watching to hear it. You are not the parent. You don't have to convince yourself it's fine. You don't have to protect anyone's feelings. You don't have to manage anyone's marriage. You are just a person who loves a child, and that is enough. That is permission enough to ask the question, to push, to take the kid to the doctor, to make the call. I almost didn't. That first Saturday, when Marcus sat too still on my couch, I almost wrote it off. I have thought about that 100 times since. What if I'd waited another week? Another month? What does 8 to 10 weeks of sedation do to a developing brain? What does 150 mornings of that feel like to a child who doesn't have the words to say what's wrong with him? Who only knows that his juice tastes like medicine and that he can't stay awake and that something isn't right? He knew something wasn't right. He told me in a gas station parking lot on Route 9, in the plainest, most devastating language a 7-year-old has. It makes my head feel full of cotton. That's what he said. And that sentence cracked something open in me that I am grateful has never closed back up. Marcus is doing well now. I want to end there because you deserve to hear it. He moved in with Thomas full-time after the custody order was made permanent 3 months later. He is in 2nd grade. He started fishing again last month. We were up before 5 a.m. on a Saturday with our lines in the water at Miller Creek, and he talked so much and so fast the entire morning that I got home with my ears ringing and a smile I couldn't shake. He's going to be okay. He has a long road still. His pediatrician is monitoring his development, and he has a counselor he sees every 2 weeks, a woman named Dr. Reyes, who he told me is pretty cool, actually. He has good days and harder days. He asks Thomas sometimes why his mom did what she did, and Thomas answers as honestly as he can, which is to say imperfectly and with love. As for Diane, I will tell you only this. The criminal case moved forward. She was charged. She entered a plea. I will leave it at that, because the legal outcome is a matter of record now, and you can find it if you look, and because the part of this story that matters most to me isn't her. It's him. It's the boy who told his grandpa that his juice tasted wrong. The boy who had been trying, in the only way he knew how, to tell someone for months. The boy who, as it turned out, just needed one person to stop and actually listen. I was 63 years old, and I had never in my life been so glad to pull into a gas station parking lot. Pay attention to the children around you, not just the loud ones, not just the ones who are obviously struggling. Pay attention to the ones who go quiet, the ones who used to climb trees and now just sit there. the ones who are still when they used to be motion. Children tell you everything, if you are present enough to hear it. I almost missed it. I will live with that. But I didn't miss it. That's the one I'm holding on to. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for a child isn't grand or dramatic, it's just stopping the car. It's noticing the quiet. It's asking one more question when the first answer doesn't quite sit right. Marcus didn't need a hero. He needed someone who knew him well enough to see that something was missing. The people who protect children most often aren't the loudest in the room, they're the ones paying attention. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI, crafted to entertain you while sharing a life lesson worth carrying with you.